Hello, everyone. My name is Collin Brennan, and in the next 20 minutes, I am going to show you 5 self-editing tricks that will help make your finance writing pop. I've actually done similar talks like this for people who are not exclusively finance writers. I tailored this one a little bit more to some of the things I see in my day job as a managing editor at Credit Karma, editing personal finance articles. So on that note, let me tell you a little bit about who I am. I am an editor with almost 10 years. Did I say 10 plus? No, just 10 years of professional experience. I started editing in 2009 at Groupon. I am currently managing editor at Credit Karma, where I oversee a team of more than 10 editors and more than 40 contributing writers, some of whom are in this room, so thanks for showing up. But I think just as importantly, I've been a freelance writer before. I've been a freelance editor. I know what it's like to work full-time as a freelancer. I know what the pain points are when you're working with an editor from that side of the coin. And so what I like to hope is that I bring some of that empathy to my job as an editor at Credit Karma. I want to kick off with one of my favorite quotes about writing. It's not a quote that is necessarily flattering to the craft, but I think it's important. Don't get discouraged because there's a lot of mechanical work to writing. There is, and you can't get out of it. You've got to work it over. The first draft of anything is, and I'll let you fill in the blank because I can't cuss. Ernest Hemingway said this when he was asked what the worst part about writing is. He was asked to give advice to new writers, and this is what he came up with. And I happen to agree very much with it, because anytime I've written a first draft of anything, and I consider myself a pretty good writer, it's never turned out the way I want it to look. And I think it's an important thing to acknowledge when you're writing, is when you finish your first draft, when you type in a flurry and you get it out on the page, you should not expect it to be good. You should not even expect it to be adequate. You should expect it to be bad, and you should move forward from there. So on that note, I'd like to get into why self-editing actually matters. And I want to come at this from a couple different angles. So if you're a paid contributor to a site like Credit Karma or a site like NerdWallet or Wirecutter or any number of other sites online, you know that the editor-writer relationship is one that's built on trust. If you're the kind of writer that your editor can trust to get stories in on time, get them in at a high quality, and get them in with an acceptable level of subject area expertise, then you're going to get more assignments, because happy editors always equal more assignments. You're also going to build that trust over time. You're going to get fewer drafts back with questions asking, where's the source for this? Asking, what do you mean by this? So it's an important thing to do. It saves you time, and it also makes your final draft it just makes it much better. Sorry, I realize I'm talking to this entire side of the room because no one's sitting over here, so I'm sorry for neglecting you guys. Also, if you're a site owner or a personal blogger, many of you here at FinCon are site owners and personal bloggers who don't write as paid contributors, but self-editing is just as important, if not more, because you don't have that editor as a backstop. You are the only person standing between your writing and when it appears on the page. So it's especially important. Why? Because when you self-edit your work, you get a more defined audience. It helps you understand, it helps you think about things like, who am I writing for? Where are they on their financial journey? How do I make this content better for the exact audience that I need to make it better for? Secondly, SEO is something everyone should care about. And SEO rank, it factors in a lot of different things, but at the end of the day, the bottom line is it's a measure of quality. And better editing produces better content, which creates a better user experience, which is correlated with SEO rank. So that's an important thing when you're trying to build your website. And most importantly, it positions you as a trustworthy source of information. Why is that important? Because in personal finance, trust is key. More so than in any other industry you could be writing in, trust is absolutely key. The Edelman Law Firm did a study where they compared trust levels in 5 different industries, and they saw that of all those 5 industries, personal finance ranks lowest by far. And it makes sense. How many of you get offers in the mail about a loan that seems too good to be true? How many of you go online and look at sites that are offering, payday loans or predatory loans? It's a very predatory space. People are very, very distrustful of people offering them loans, offering them money, because they know sometimes it's too good to be true. So if you're a personal finance writer, not only should you be worried about the quality of your content, you should be worried about how trustworthy your audience or your reader is perceiving you. So on that note, I'd like to get into the actual 5 tricks. I'm going to tackle them one by one, and at the end I'll have a big summary. We can go over it again, and I'll leave a little bit of time for questions as well. So the first trick is probably the most obvious one, and it's the most sort of broad and all-encompassing one. It's give yourself what I like to call the reader gut check. So before you write anything, and after you write the first draft, so do this twice, ask yourself 3 questions. Ask yourself the who, the what, and the where. The who is, who am I writing for? Some people, when they're writing, like to picture a specific person, whether it be a friend or a relative in their life. Some people don't get that granular. Some people just like to think, okay, cool, so I'm writing for, millennials, maybe millennial women. You want to get as specific as possible because that can really help you tailor your content. What is their level of knowledge? This is so important in personal finance. Many of us out there, many of us in this room and out in the expo, we consider ourselves personal finance experts. We know the factors that go into a good credit score. We know what things like credit utilization is and how it affects your credit. Your audience might not know that. So if you're writing for someone who's building credit from scratch, you need to talk to them on their level. Similarly, if you're writing for someone who's looking for a new travel rewards card or looking to churn their next travel rewards card, you write to them on their level. They don't need to know about things like what is APR, because they know that stuff. They never have to pay interest because they're paying their cards off and they're getting new ones. So make sure you understand your audience before you do anything. And again, that relates to where are they on their financial journey? Are they building credit from scratch? Are they already there? Are they looking to expand their breadth of knowledge? Are they looking for a new home loan? Most people looking for a new home loan haven't ever bought a home before, so they're going to need you to hold their hand a little bit more. It's a good thing to think about. And I want to show you 2 examples. Oh no, they don't appear very well up there. Anyway, I'll walk you through them anyway. So the first is on the left is from the National Foundation for Credit Counseling. It's a foundation, nonprofit, that is primarily focused on helping people build credit when they don't have any, helping people get out of debt. And on the right, you have the Points Guy, which is a site that's very popular amongst travel credit card churners. Obviously, very different audiences. If you can't read that, I'll kind of walk you through it. The first one is I took it from a page that's about building credit using a credit card, building it responsibly, trying to get out of debt without carrying a balance. And the tone is remarkably different from the example on the right. The first sentence is, managing credit is a challenge that we all face. So it's trying to bring the reader in and say, listen, you're not alone in this. This may look confusing, it may seem a little difficult, but let me hold your hand and walk you through this. And the rest of the paragraph continues in that same tone. On the right, you have an example from the Points Guy. The first sentence is, at this point, it's pretty much gospel that cashback credit cards aren't nearly as lucrative as points and mile earning cards. If you are building credit from scratch, you have no idea what that means. You have no idea. You are immediately lost. But if you're someone who visits the Point Guy on a daily basis, what you're saying is, cool, this guy gets me. He's talking to me on my level, and that's important. So it's very important to know who your audience is before you write. Trick 2. You've probably heard from a lot of writing teachers and a lot of people in the world that less is more. I'm here to tell you that less is sometimes more, not always, because in personal finance, it's obviously we're dealing with a lot of complex topics that have a very profound impact on people's lives. So you don't always want to go for pure simplicity for simplicity's sake. But there are ways you can clean up your content and make it more digestible. One way you can do that is to remove repetitive and unnecessary text. If there are giant paragraph blocks in your articles or giant paragraph blocks in your blog, break them up. If there's if there's long lists that can be transferred into bulleted lists, change them into a bulleted list. Write in a format that people are used to reading on their phones. So think about someone on the subway, coming home from work, scrolling through one of your articles. How are they going to be able to digest that information in a way that makes sense for them? Sometimes that means adding tables to simplify some of the longer text you write after the table. Sometimes it means using a combination of that. So here's an example from Credit Karma where we use some of those tricks I just pointed out. So at the top there, we have this thing called In a Nutshell, which is basically the high-level summary of the article. It's just a short paragraph saying, here's the basic point you need to take away from this article. And this helps for people who just come to the site and they come to the article and they say, okay, cool, learn that, doesn't really apply to me, now I can leave. So you're creating the trust that way. Also, you're creating something that people can reference again and say, okay, cool, this looks like an article that's written for me. I'm going to continue. Similarly, this is taken from a standard credit card review of a credit card called the Avant card. And one of the things we have at the top there is just a quick table that says what we like and heads up. So this is about a 1,000-word article where we really get into the nitty-gritty of who this card's for, what we like about it. But at the very top, we just want to add that quick table. What do we like? What should you look out for? We'll get into it later, but you want to give the reader anchor points. You want to give them places in the text where they can stop, breathe, and really start to understand the information. And those are just a few ways of doing it. Similarly, that thing at the bottom there is just a pull quote. Sometimes if you're interviewing someone, it's nice just to pull their quotes out and highlight them, because it gives readers just a really quick, nice and easy snippet of information. That's more if you're a personal blogger, but also if you're submitting as a paid contributor, just highlight places where you think that kind of stuff might work. Your editors will very much appreciate it. Your third trick is a little trickier, and I want to spend a little more time explaining what I mean by this. So trick 3 is test hybrid tones to boost trust and engagement. So there's a consulting group called Nelson Norman. They came up with these 4 core tone of voice dimensions. And it looks kind of complicated, but when you break it down, it makes a lot of sense. So the 4 dimensions are funny versus serious, formal versus casual, respectful versus irreverent, and enthusiastic versus matter of fact. So all these are kind of related to one another, but every piece of text, every blog, every article, everything you write is going to fall somewhere on these scales. So for example, if you're reading a legal text, it's probably going to fall very far on the right of this. It's going to be serious, formal, very respectful, and very matter of fact. There's not going to be much color to it, and that's for a reason. If you're reading some personal blogs, it's going to fall on the exact opposite end. It's going to be very funny. The writer's going to be trying to be very quippy, trying to be very casual, kind of ingratiate themselves to the writer. Could be a little bit irreverent, because irreverence always grabs attention too. And it might be like really overly enthusiastic, using a lot of exclamation points. This is not in my tips, but I don't really like exclamation points, don't like using them. So just that's a bonus one. If this doesn't make sense to you, I'm going to show you 3 examples right now. They all basically say the same thing, but they say it in a different tone. The first one's going to be very formal. The second one's going to be very casual, very irreverent. And the third is going to be what I call a hybrid tone, something that combines formal and just a little bit of casual to gain the reader's trust. So let's look at these. Example 1. Travel rewards credit cards generally come with higher APRs for purchases and balance transfers. Carrying a balance with these cards is not wise, as it could result in high interest charges that offset your rewards. Again, very formal, very matter of fact, telling the information in a way that's not super hard to parse, but also doesn't bring a lot of color to it. If I'm a reader approaching this text, I'm not really compelled to read on. Example 2. So, you say you want a travel rewards card. Cool your jets, future jet setter. First, you've got to come to grips with the fact that these cards tend to have super high APRs. So kiss the thought of carrying a balance from month to month goodbye. So you might think that this is a really good example of trying to get on someone's level when you're talking about personal finance. But at Credit Karma, we actually did a lot of qualitative research. We reached out to a lot of our readers to see what they think about text like this. And the answer was actually surprising. They don't like it. If you're a personal finance writer and you're writing for your audience, they want to know that you're a serious person because they're serious about their money. They don't want jokers giving them advice about how to handle their money. So while this seems like the best way to engage your readers, it seems like the best way to bring them into your fold and gain an audience and gain traction, I think a lot of people at FinCon probably try to write like this. I'm here to tell you that it's not always the best case. It's also, you don't have to sway all the way the other way either. You can have what I call a hybrid tone. So let's look at example 3. Travel rewards cards generally come with higher APRs to make up for the additional benefits these cards provide. That's not necessarily a deal breaker, but it's important to understand that carrying a balance with these types of cards could sting. So again, this isn't the kind of stuff you'd find in the terms and conditions of a credit card, but it's also not swaying way too far the other direction. You're kind of getting in that happy medium where you're getting on the reader's side, you're building trust, but you're also giving them a reason to engage with your content further. If you want to think about yourself as a personal finance expert talking to your reader, maybe think about yourself as an older sibling. Not just a sibling, not just like a close friend who kind of is goofy sometimes, but an older sibling, someone who's been through it before and now wants to impart that knowledge on the reader. So again, just to recap, when you're evaluating a financial product, especially, aim for a hybrid of serious and casual. Don't sway too far in either direction. Trick 4, kill your darlings and your adverbs too. So what does it mean by kill your darlings? It's not just a clever turn of phrase. It's something that you see a lot in not just finance writing, but everywhere. So this one's a little bit more universally applicable. A lot of writers like to think that they're smart. I'm a writer. I think I'm smart. Doesn't mean everyone else does. And I think that there's a huge pitfall you can fall into is when you're trying so hard to convince your reader that you're funny, or you're smart, or you're clever, or you can turn a phrase, or you're really good at making puns work, because readers aren't always on the same page as you there. Usually that's something that just you're getting the most enjoyment out of, and it's really getting in the way of reader understanding and legibility. So my advice to bloggers and to finance writers is always just be prepared to delete your favorite phrases or sentences. Go through an article, identify the phrases that you're most proud of, that you feel the most like, that was a really good turn of phrase, and just delete it. See if the text is any different. See if it's any clearer. You might be surprised by the results. This is the kind of thing that happens in sports writing a lot. I don't know if you guys ever read like the sports editorial page. I'm from LA. I grew up reading a really horrific sports columnist named Bill Plaschke, and he does stuff like this all the time. So this is from, I just got this from last week. All I had to do is search his name. And the first article that came up, I got an example. So this is about USC Trojans losing to the Texas Longhorns. The Trojans walked into a raucous Darrell K. Royal Texas Memorial Stadium that was juiced with orange. They walked out as pulp. That sucks. That sucks. You can almost hear him like patting himself on the back for that, and I hate it. I hate it so much. So don't do it. Don't do it. Your editor's going to delete it. You should probably delete it in the first place. Just don't do it. Leave it to the sports writers. Then I'll also leave you with another quote from one of my favorite writers, Stephen King. I believe the road to hell is paved with adverbs. I am actually not as militaristically opposed to adverbs as Stephen King is, because sometimes they have a place, but I also have identified that writers overuse them, myself included. And it makes sense why you would overuse them. Because as a writer, what you're trying to do is basically translate the thoughts in your head into a language that your audience understands. And sometimes you'll use a verb. Sometimes you'll use a verb like walk. And you want to be like, well, that's not exactly what I'm trying to get at. I want to get like at a specific kind of walking. So I'm going to say, you gingerly walked. But you don't always need to do that. Sometimes context is what provides those answers for you. And sometimes having all those adverbs can really just get in the way. It doesn't clarify your writing. It doesn't make things clearer. So I really love this quote because it's taken from that proverb, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. I think every adverb does have a good intention. The good intention is adding more clarity. And I think what Stephen King is trying to say here is, sometimes good intentions don't work out the way you think they will. The final trick, and this is actually the most important, and I think it's the one that will probably have the most immediate impact on your writing, so I'm going to dwell on it maybe a little bit longer. Make a list of your bad habits. So as writers, again, we have very high opinions of ourselves. We like to think that we've learned from our mistakes. We like to think that we're, every draft we submit, every article we submit is better than the last one. It's not always true because sometimes we have bad habits that are hard to kick. Sometimes we have bad habits. I was talking to a writer on the floor yesterday, and he was saying he got a draft back from one of his editors, and he said, the draft just basically said, you have way too many repetitive phrases in here, like I want to see a new one. And he was expressing frustration because the editor failed to say what the repetitive phrases were. He failed to say, it would have been so much more actionable if he had just said, you used the word however 87 times in this 1,000-word article. Maybe you should cool your jets on that word however. But he didn't get that, and he was really frustrated with it. And so I think that one of the ways we can look out for that is to make a list of your own bad habits. Before you submit a draft to your editor, look through your document and see if you can identify any bad habits that you have. I know that I have a lot. I just listed out some of the ones that I have here, so don't feel lonely. Repetitive sentence construction. Writing the same sentence construction over and over and over gets very tedious to a reader, and sometimes it's not super easy to identify. But sometimes maybe it's just, if it's something you really want to look out for, maybe just scan some of your sentences. See where the subjects are. See where the verbs are coming. See where your prepositional phrases are. Just try to understand if you're being a little bit too repetitive in your construction, because language is also music. Sentences should snap. Sentences should have variety. These are things that are very important and very subtle, and sometimes writers don't pay enough attention to them. Another thing, harping on adverbs again, like empty calorie adverbs. Most adverbs aren't good, but these are especially bad. Adverbs like very and really, they kind of make you sound more casual. They kind of make you sound like you're more on the reader's side, but they're not necessary. I understand the impulse as a finance writer to use those. What I'm telling you is you don't have to. And 9 times out of 10 when you cut them, your piece isn't missing anything. Look out for signs of passive voice. Look out for signs of, look out for sentences that start with there is or there are. That's another really big one. A lot of writers will look over their work and they'll be like, oh God, I use there as a subject like so many times in this piece. What if I just rearrange the sentence, give it a new subject, make it a little bit more actionable, take away those sort of really boring sentence instructions, all of a sudden your piece will come alive. One way to do this, this doesn't work with all the examples here, but use Control F. If you know that you use a phrase like of course all the time, or like quite all the time, that's another really bad adverb. Use Control F, just type those phrases in, and you'll see all of a sudden. You type in of course and 18 instances come up, then you probably have an issue that you need to fix. Make sense? Cool, so here are the 5 tricks again, and then I'm gonna leave a little bit of time to answer some questions if you have any. But I wanna go over these real quick, just to kind of put it all on the same page, and hopefully this is something you can take away and apply to your writing right away. So trick 1, give yourself that reader gut check. Definitely take time to know your audience, know who you're writing for. This is so important in finance writing because, again, most of us, if not all of us, are writing from the vantage point of being the expert, being the guide, being the person who's taking someone who has no idea what they're doing and showing them the way forward. And so we're writing to our readers on a very different level from where they are. And so identifying that distinction and correcting for it can be very important. Also, less can be more. Again, it's not always more in personal finance because these are very complex issues. And you probably cannot get away with a 200-word article on how interest works. So less isn't always more, but it can be. Break your longer sentences up into bulleted lists, break them up into tables, play around with formatting, short, snappy sentences, break your paragraphs up, give some visual clues to your reader as to where their eyes should be resting. We don't often think about writing as a visual art, but it really is. When you're looking at a page full of text, the eye is drawn to different aspects of the text. 3, test hybrid tones. Hybrid tones can help you boost not only trust, but also engagement. You can boost trust by coming across as credible, coming across as serious, letting your audience know that, hey, I'm going to bring a level of seriousness to this that is warranted, but I'm not going to be too stuffy about it. I'm like you, I'm on your level, but I want you to know that this is something serious that we need to handle. 4, kill your darlings. Get rid of those clever turns of phrase. Don't be a sports writer. They're the worst writers ever. They're the worst writers. I don't like them. And your adverbs, get rid of the adverbs too. And then 5, again, write down a list of your bad habits. Tape it to your desktop monitor. Put it away in your drawer so that when you finish your first draft, you can take it out and reference it. Save it in an Excel spreadsheet. However you want to do it, make a running list. If your editors come at you and they provide you with feedback, really internalize that feedback and write it down so that you have it in the future. Because that's the best way you're going to improve as a writer. It's the best way you're going to improve as a self-editor, and it's the best way to just know what your bad habits are. It's the best way of understanding where your pitfalls lie and then fixing them. So on that note, does anyone have any questions? Anything I didn't cover that maybe you run into on a daily basis, or feedback you get from your editors, or things that you publish as a blogger that maybe you want to talk through a little bit more? All right, I guess that means I did my job. Thank you.